Just to recap, there are four main operations that we can have on files. We have opening a file, we have reading from a file, writing to a file, and closing it. So far, we talked about how to open a file and how to close it. We sort of briefly talked about what we need to create a file object that is ready to be read from, and how to create a file object that is ready to write to. But mainly the first thing that you need to do whenever you're dealing with text file is opening a file. You need to specify if you want to open the file to read from or to write to. And then at the end, you are going to close that file. All right? These two things should be kind of the first two lines that you should write when you're dealing with text file. Opening a file and then closing it. Now let's look closely to a text file. Okay, so this is my fruit and vegetable.txt file, and in that I have a bunch of fruits and vegetables. So the way that a text file is created is you have your lines of code, okay, so apples, and in the next line you have pears. But the way that you went to the next line was by an invisible new line character. So at the end of apples, there is this invisible new line character that you cannot see, but it exists. It exists, and that specifies that there is a new line. So then you go to the next line. And that becomes very handy when we are reading from a text file or when we want to write to a text file. Let's see how. There is this function when we are working with text file, readline method, that returns as a string the next line of a text file, including the end of the line character, new line character. So basically this read line looks for this new line character and knows this is one line of code. And that is a way for it to identify different lines in a text file. At the end of each text file, there is end of the file character. Again, this is an invisible character. You cannot see it, but exists. And as soon as readline reaches that, it knows there is nothing else and it returns an empty strings. And if you're, for instance, creating a while loop to go through a text file, you can have this readline character, and as soon as readline character returns empty string, that means you reach the end, you can terminate your while loop. So here's an example. You are getting a file name from user and you're opening a file that is you plan to read from it. Okay, so open file name that you got from the user and you're opening it to read from it. You are storing that information, that file object, into this variable input file. You do some like operations on it, and then at the end you make sure you close that file object. So input file dot close, and then you make sure you opened it and you always close it at the end. All right, so now let's focus on the centerpiece where we are handling that text file. We are trying to look at the information that is in that text file. All right, so as we talked in a previous slide, readline function reads the current line. So basically, whenever you're opening a text file, you always are starting from the beginning. All right, and with readline function, you're reading the current line. All right, it reads the current line, and then after it's done, you go to the next line, to the next line, to the next line. All right, so you're gradually moving down until you reach to the end of your file, right? So let's go and take a look of how this works. All right, so I'm going to read some data, the 3 lines that I have inside data.txt. All right, so let's see how we do it. I'm getting the name of the file from user. I'm opening my file, and then I make sure I close it. So if I run this and if I put data.txt, it should be fine. All right, so now I'm going to try to read from that file. So I'm going to say, all right, so this is my file object. I'm going to say input.file.read line, open and close parentheses. All right, so if I run it, let's just put this one. I'm not going to get anything because the line is received from that text file, but I'm not doing anything to it. So if you want to see it, you can say, for instance, print it. So now if I do it, if I put data.txt, I see this line 1, which comes from a text file, which is super cool. I was able to read something from an external file. If you just keep going, you will read the next line and the next line in that file. So we have so far only 3 lines in that text file, and you simply are able to read all of them using read line function. So line 1, line 2, and line 3. Why do I get this blank line between them? Because in my text file there is no blank line between those lines. The reason is, again, at the end of each of these lines you have an invisible new line character, and that happens because you hit enter to create that next line. So that new line character exists, but you don't see them. All right, and when you are collecting that line from that text file, that new line character is also part of that line. It is part of the line, so it is stored in that string that you collected from that text file, and when you print it, you see that new line character. It is exactly same as saying line 1 new line character. So if I do this, I'm going to actually it's going the output is going to be slightly different. I talk about that. It's going to be line 1, the blank line, and you see here I started reading from a text file, so this line is going to be my first line. Alright, going back to this, I was able to read the data or the information that I have inside a text file, although I have the new line extra line between them. We can get rid of that. We will talk about it in a second. But let's say I want to read the information from this text file, which is fruits and vegetables. And you see I have so many lines here, many lines. So how can I deal with something like this? Should I put print input file dot read line, like many of them? That doesn't make sense. If you have something like this, like a big text file, there should be a way, like an easier way, that you can go through all of the lines until you get to the end of the file. And that way is by using a loop. You simply know the end of the file character is an empty string, so you're simply looking for that empty string. So if it's not empty string, you just keep going until you get to that one. So I'm going to change this to a while loop. So I'm going to take out all of the values, all of the extra print function that I have, and I'm going to kind of reorder it. So I'm going to say, all right, store this information into this variable line, and if you print line, it's going to be exactly the same thing, right? Because I'm storing the string that comes, and that is the first line, into this variable line, and then printing line. So now I'm going to create a while loop. I'm going to say if line is not equal to empty, just keep going. All right, so print the current line and then read the next line. Right? Read the next line. If it's not empty, print it, read the next line, so on and so forth. So if I do this, I should get the exact same output, right? This way it becomes automatic, it's much easier. So if I want to read information from my fruits and vegetable text file, is just like it's going to be exact same lines of codes. So let's try that. I'm going to run this. I haven't changed my code at all. And this time I want to put fruits and vegetables, I think, .txt if I typed it correctly. And here you go. This is all of the fruits and vegetables that I have inside that text file. So it doesn't matter what text file you're passing to it. It just goes through all of the lines that you have in it and prints them for you. You can also use a for loop to do that for you. Simply with this file object, for knows its exact size. So it becomes similar to a sequence, and you can traverse over the sequence and take each of the lines and print them. So let's see how that works. Let's try it. So in here, I'm going to take this whole thing out and say for, or actually let me comment. I accidentally paused the video, so I'm not sure which part I explained. So I'm going to just try to write the for loop one more time. So for line, which is the name of my variable, in my sequence. So input file and then colon, and you simply say print line. All right, so it's simply all of the lines that you have inside input file are going to be assigned into this variable line one by one. So you're simply traversing over input file and then you're printing each one of them. So if I run it, and if I put data.txt, goes through all of the lines that I have inside that data file. And if I do it for fruits and vegetables, .txt is going to be a similar thing. So the difference between for and while loop when we are dealing with text file is when you use a for loop, all lines of files will be read one by one. When you're using a while loop, on the other hand, lines can be read until a given value is found, like the previous examples. Let's say I'm going to comment these ones back. Let's say you're looking for fruit apple. Okay, so you want to keep going until you find apple. So I can say apples. So keep going until line is equal to apple. All right, or hold on a second, until it is not equal to apple, sorry. So you just want to keep going. So let's run it, see what we get. I'm going to say fruits and vegetables, and I expect to see all the fruits up to apple. All right, and as you saw, I got an infinite loop. The reason is this line does not exist in this text file. I mean, the first one is apple, but it also has a new line character, invisible new line character at the end of it. So if I do not include new line character, it is not going to recognize that. So let's go for peers because that is a second item. So peers and then new line character, which is invisible in the text file, but exists. So if you're looking for an item, you need to make sure that you include that new line character. So here you go, fruits and vegetables .txt, and here you go, only apple showed up because you reached to pears. So let's pick a different fruits, for instance limes. So if I compare it with limes, then you should see the first 5 fruits and then it should stop right there. So fruits and vegetable, I'm just going to copy that, put it here, and here you go. The first one, the first 5 fruits showed up, and as soon as you reach to limes, it stops. Okay, so when you're having a while loop, it makes it easier to look for a specific item. You can do it for like when you do for loops, but it make more sense to use while loop, because that way you're not trying to like traverse over the entire file object.